Good. Good afternoon, everybody. So it's good to be back in Nigeria. I've been away for 15 years, so it's great to be back in Lagos. Everybody, my name is Ben Roberts. I've been building infrastructure in Africa for some years. But most recently, I've been consulting, working in Kenya, and I'm a special advisor to UNICEF around the economics of connecting schools to internet. So it's a similar theme. And the presentation today is around bridging the digital divide to connect schools across Sub-Saharan Africa and a global network for education. And good. So this is the facts of the matter. Nearly half of the world's schools are not connected to internet. Now they have they might be within a coverage zone for 3G or 2G or 4G, even 5G if they're lucky, but they're not really connected, right? They're not really using the connectivity. Just having a radio signal of mobile broadband doesn't necessarily mean that you're connected in the way you need to be connected for education. So in Africa, this is the numbers. It's around 800,000 schools in Africa, and around half a million, 500,000 schools. Students don't have access to the internet. Now this map is part of what I'll be talking about. UNICEF and the International Telecommunications Union have a partnership called GIGA, which is an initiative to connect all schools in the world to internet. And they've been doing various initiatives to try and drive this. But the first thing they set out to do was to map where the schools are, finding out in Africa, talking to education ministries and other stakeholders in the continent, mapping where the schools are, and have developed that map into what is an interactive map, showing not only the schools, but showing a color. If they're red, they're not connected to the internet. If they're green, they're connected. But blue is unknown, the status is unknown. But generally, the numbers are there. I've given you the facts and figures. So the question I'm here to ask is, how can we get more schools and health centers as well connected to the internet, right? This question's been bugging me for some years, and now I've got more time to focus on that. It's what we're here for. UNICEF, as a UN agency, has a neutral position by leveraging, the UNICEF's neutral position. It is ultimately there to help children, right? It is a UN agency to benefit children globally, and has been able to do that with something like vaccines. Was able to influence the market, procure vaccines in bulk, and make sure children globally get vaccinated. They're now looking at how to do the same with connectivity at schools. Influencing that power and also buying power, looking at how to create a global safe network for children. Now, the success so far, the success that UNICEF and GIGA have had so far, is working in some countries, Rwanda in Africa and Kyrgyzstan in Eastern Europe, but looking at helping governments to connect more schools by driving down the cost, by helping with procurement, by helping with other policy advice, technology, innovation, helping bring down that cost. In Rwanda, schools were being connected at around $20 a megabits per second, driving that down to $9 a megabits per second. We want to take that further to make it more affordable. But increasing the speed. So in Rwanda, the schools connected by UNICEF and GIGA have 25 megabits per second, which is a good chunk of bandwidth for an African school. So most of the interventions, though, that have been taking place in connecting schools have been around the last mile of connectivity. And I think we had a lot of discussion around last mile, first mile, middle mile this morning, but the World Bank have defined this terminology. Last mile is that last piece of connectivity to get a school connected to the nearest tower, to the nearest fiber node. But then there's this middle mile, gets that fiber node, that tower, back to a data center somewhere in a big city. But we're really here, this is the project I'm presenting today, is to talk about that first mile. And that first mile is the crux of what we've been talking about, some of the economics that we saw in Patrick's presentation this morning. How much does IP transit cost in a capital city of a particular country? We saw that Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya coming below $1, but he showed other data for Ivory Coast saying it was $3. But the reality is there are many countries where it's much, much more. So when we look at connecting a school, in many countries, that first and middle mile is 70% of the cost of connecting a school. The last mile piece is actually, not only 30 to 50%, but it's really coming in, taking a big chunk of the cost. Especially in landlocked countries where that first mile cost is very expensive. And then in big countries, DRC, Tanzania, these are very large areas. The middle mile is having long distances, the fiber is getting long distances to get to other cities, towns, rural areas. So not every country in Africa has the same, not in the same place of digital development, and many countries have still very expensive first mile internet. So I'm going to also ask, this is a bit of my own research, right? But how much bandwidth does a school need, and what do they do with it? All right, so I've been doing projects connecting schools at scale, Universal Service Fund projects, other regional government projects for some years. And we see that when you first connect a school to internet, say you give it 5 megabits per second, which seems like a lot, but it isn't really. They really can use it, right? Easily, they can download 2 terabytes a month, which would cost you a fortune. If you're using mobile data, they wouldn't be able to afford to buy 2 terabytes of mobile data bundles in a month. Even with satellite, using traditional geostationary satellites, which would be a shared service, maybe a top speed of 5 megabits per second, easily downloading half a terabyte. Now with the innovations coming with Starlink and other LEO constellations along the way, making a higher speed available from the satellite, schools can easily download 4 terabytes on a satellite link. Fiber can be much more. Once you sort of unthrottle, even if you put Wi-Fi around the whole school, several access points so that children and teachers can use the internet in all the classrooms of the whole area of the school, and then you take away the capping, you stop capping the speed, they get up to 30, 40, 50 megabits per second using multiple terabytes. It is the demand is potentially higher than the supply, and we've been throttling the supply by the cost factors that have been there. And then what do they do with it? They use the same, they're accessing the same content from the internet that we are. Google and YouTube in particular is the most used service in a school. There's a lot of cat videos, but there's a lot of educational content on YouTube as well. So this is being popular, but all the popular services, whether all you guys are in the room, those popular services are being downloaded in schools anywhere that you connect them. But back to this cost factor, right? Once you get into landlocked countries, you can easily have first mile cost, the price of IP transit in a country, can easily be $10 per megabits per second, or even far more, right, depending on where you are. And that makes it effectively unaffordable. If a school needs 50 megabits per second to, that is the demand, and the school needs that much bandwidth, just that first mile cost at $10 a meg is $500 a month. That's way, way, way more than an African rural school can afford in its budget to buy its internet. We have to get this price that a school can spend has to be somewhere way below $100. It's no way it can be in the hundreds and hundreds. It just won't happen. Even when interventions are made, a lot of development finance money has been spent into last mile, connecting schools to the internet. And then once the when the funding runs out, school can't afford the bandwidth, and then the project gets turned off. This is what's happening in a lot of, we see universal service funds and other interventions. It's not being sustainable. So we're looking at how to intervene, how to make it sustainable. I want to just unpack a bit around some of the economics of why the first mile costs in landlocked countries are expensive. So I'm picking a case example of Malawi here, right? Malawi has to use a long distance line to get to the nearest peering point where you can buy cheap internet. So the nearest peering point to Malawi is where you can get cheap internet is either South Africa or Nairobi. We saw the prices today. You can get to both, but it's a long way, whatever way you go. It's right smack in the middle of the continent. Africa's really large. So there are two routes to South Africa, one route to Nairobi, but all of them are a long way, and they have to go through expensive fiber routes, expensive national backbones. So this thing Patrick was talking about, IP transit versus pipe and port. So from Malawi to get to that internet point, you've got two pieces of the cost, that pipe to get to Nairobi or to get to Joburg, and then that port where you're buying the IP transit in Nairobi or Joburg. And that port is a small piece of the cost, and then that pipe is a very large piece of the cost. And then other cross connects along the way, particularly if you're using multiple subsea cables, we can have very high costs for just a small piece of patch cord within a landing station. This is driving up the economics of what it costs for the first mile internet in Malawi. So back to that example, and this is, Patrick presented this picture this morning, pipe and port versus local IP transit. This is last year's data I have here. I didn't see his presentation until this morning. But we see in the more developed markets, Nairobi, Lagos, Johannesburg, that IP transit is much cheaper than that pipe and port. It's much cheaper than a circuit from Nairobi to London, Nairobi to Southern Europe. IP transit has come down to be much cheaper. The figures shown this morning are even more. It's even the cost of IP transit in Nairobi is half of the cost of that pipe and port. And yes, last year it was a little bit, 25% less. Now it's 50% less. So you see it driving down. Now, what is generally happening to the dynamic of driving that price down is that you have all these other elements that blend the cost. You get what is effectively a weighted average of the cost. So if you're in Nairobi, you've got some piece which is a long line to London, you've got some caches, you've got some local peering, you've got a local internet exchange, you've got global content providers. So the cost of your megabits per second becomes a blended average of all of those things put together, and the more caches and edge nodes and peers that you have in a country drives down that weighted average. This 70% or 80% ratio we're talking about, where South Africa is getting more than 80% of its traffic locally, Nigeria, Kenya, it's more than 70, nearly 80. But if you're in a landlocked, least developed country, you can see on the left, this is an open data source showing all the caches in Africa, and you see that the density of caches and edge nodes and edge data centers is extremely low once you get into the center of the continent. It's quite, you can see quite a lot of dots around Johannesburg, Nairobi, Lagos, but once you get into Sudan, Niger, DRC, you're seeing a very low density. This is really affecting the cost of the first mile internet. So what UNICEF are setting to do is to drive, enable education to have connectivity it can afford, setting new strategies, partnering and procuring capacity, wholesale capacity in bulk to bulk procurement to drive down and get affordable capacity. The more you buy, the cheaper the price per megabits per second. We all know the economics of getting capacity, but also supporting governments with by using the relationship UNICEF has with education and the governments, enabling governments to get financing to connect their schools, to drive the demand. So they are looking to negotiate on the supply, working with the customer, the governments to drive the demand, and then working on monitoring and which we saw in the map. You saw those green dots, red dots, just like a knock screen, right? It's seeing, is this school actually connected? And looking at what is the performance of the project. So it's not just putting money into connecting schools, it's helping development finance bring money to governments to connect schools, and then checking from the active monitoring, are these schools connected? Are they live? Are they using the bandwidth, et cetera, et cetera. So the project that we're looking to put into place, and this is why I'm helping UNICEF, is to create it will be spawned out of the UN system, but create a not-for-profit entity, which will be entering into partnerships, global partnerships, national partnerships, with infrastructure owners, ISPs, development finance bringing the money, most importantly, and governments bringing the offtake, connecting their schools and getting their kids connected to internet. So the plan is to focus on the government demand, grow the government demand, and create a special network just for schools. A bit like an NREN. I've seen Renu were just here. NRENs have been focusing across universities in Africa, and they've been doing a very good job, almost for 10, 15, 20 years, connecting most campuses to universities, most university campuses to internet, but somewhere we forgot to connect the schools. So putting together a global backbone across the continent to feed that education sector, the school education system, and also rural healthcare aside. So 3 particular elements to the project. And we got some loose names here, but we're calling them GBone, GCache, and GMonitor. But GBone is effectively building that backbone network, connecting multiple countries. From those cheap peering points, we've heard Nairobi, Lagos, South Africa, and connecting that into the landlocked countries, and doing that in a multi-country way to drive down the price, partnerships and procurement to get capacity at the best rate. And then caching, helping host caches in countries, in landlocked, least developed countries, putting together the caching strategies of different providers who have CDNs and cache networks, and hosting that within a safe environment, within a data center or a government data center, but not under government control, being part of this not-for-profit network. And then monitoring to make sure that the capacity that's being delivered by the network is being exclusively used for the intended purpose, which is to connect schools. It's not a network to compete with telcos or backbone providers. It's not going to be selling it commercially, won't be selling it to enterprise customers. It can provide the bandwidth directly to government and government agencies, but also to ISPs purely for connecting schools, and the monitoring side is making sure that bandwidth is being used for that special purpose. I know that we are here in Nigeria, in West Africa. We are looking at interventions building this network in multiple countries, but anywhere really in mostly Sub-Saharan Africa. West Africa is definitely on the plans, but I'm just showing here, this is the sort of regional network we're talking about. Coming in subsea cables into those points, Mombasa, Nairobi, where we'll be peering and connecting to in the data centers that are there. But then building out backbone networks to the main cities within East Africa, and also rings connecting to other secondary towns and cities. So driving down the first mile costs and the middle mile costs that's being used by organizations that are connecting schools. That is the principle. That's what we're here to propose. This is where the project is at. A feasibility study took place towards the end of last year. And that was done by NTT Data Consulting. And that was also fed back at AfricaCom. A lot of stakeholders attended, and we got feedback around that that particular feasibility study. Now we are into the inception phase, and this is what I have to do, and this is what I'm here to talk about. And that is to put together basically an MVP, bootstrapping this thing together, get a network working, but really establishing, within the next 6 months will be fully established and running, but growing really towards 2028, 2030, towards being a fully sustainable, not-for-profit entity, but not giving away the bandwidth, but partnering to procure the bandwidth in the right way, and selling the bandwidth to schools' connectivity projects in such a way as to build a self-sustaining entity. The success matrix is positive 20% NOR, so the thing is working and financing itself. 58,000 just for this particular East African potential I showed. It could be more for West Africa, but 58,000 schools connected as a very bare minimum, and then 11,000 healthcare centers. So looking at some basic targets of impact as well as financial sustainability. This is our peering personal, really. It's a partnership personal, peering personal. So why should you partner with this particular new initiative? We haven't quite got a name for it, but we are here to talk about it. Really, we're looking for people with shared vision, organizations that want to provide equitable access to information for educators, schools, and healthcare, catalyzing the education healthcare connectivity system, leading to longer-term national digital transformation, right? By bringing connectivity into the education system earlier, you're looking at a longer-term outcome of driving a nation's change, of adopting digital. We hope to bring more development capital from development finance into this area, which will enable money to flow from development finance to build out infrastructure, which can be used then, partners can sell that capacity to their own customers, but they are setting aside some capacity purely for the purpose of connecting schools. And the sustainable model, we have to have this happening. But what we are attempting to do is to open up a new market segment, not here to compete with existing wholesale business, backhaul business. It is saying, by setting aside this bandwidth to connect schools, availing it to them cheaper, you open up a whole new segment. You open up, governments can suddenly afford to connect all their schools when they couldn't afford it before. They're not buying the bandwidth from ISPs to connect all their schools because it's too expensive. The price needs to be driven down. The intervention is required. That was why you should partner. How can you partner? Peering and caching. We've come to a peering conference for a reason. Part of building this network and driving down that cost for education is going to be working with local peers, global peers, in internet exchange points that are already there, but also extending edge caches into farther and deeper reaching places that they've not reached so far. People with underused capacity. If you're lighting up dark fibers, you might be putting 80 wavelengths in there and probably initially starting with a 100 gigabit capacity, one wavelength, potentially monetizing the unused capacity. We've seen the same with, I think, NRENs. I think, using more capacity than initially when they were first starting up, providing more capacity to universities, but still paying for the capacity. Right? This is not about giving away free internet. This is about building, using what is available, and using it for the right purpose. Technology and technical assistance. So we are looking for partners who can help with boots on ground, second-hand or second-loved equipment as well. Can be very useful in building this up and getting this off the ground. just like we see some of our internet exchanges might be running on donated switches, that kind of thing. And then we're working with some other tech companies in the space of DNS and other things to help us with technical assistance. And then data center hosting, again, we do need to get up and running. We're looking to be talking to data centers, internet exchange points, IP transit providers, other resources that we can talk to about how to ramp up capacity until this thing is live and kicking. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much. Looking to have any questions would be great, but I am here. I'll just get my colleague Naroa, who is from UNICEF, to wave. So we're here for the whole of this week and ready to talk partnerships. Thank you very much.
Oops. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much, Ben, for the presentation. I really like it, and for me, it really speaks to my heart, because prior to doing what I'm doing right now, I did 15 years in NGOs working with kids, so really happy to see that. But now I have a question, because it's very interesting to call for partnership with ISPs. I've seen that there is a part about government engagement, but my fear is, how do you ensure sustainability? Because I know that my friends from ISPs and data center, they are businesses. At first, they can give things for free or at a reasonable price, but how do you ensure that on the long run it doesn't become a trap for those schools who will invest a lot of time, energy to make sure that their schools are connected, and at the end it becomes a money trap where they have to spend a lot of money to keep being connected? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. We have to differentiate between free and reasonable price, and people spending money to give things for free is in the CSR world. We're not really. This isn't a CSR project. This is financially engineered to be a sustainable project. The numbers we have from the feasibility study do stack up to a 20% NOR. We're not expecting to give the bandwidth to governments for free. We're expecting governments to pay and to mobilize development and finance capital to help them pay for that, right? So that is where the likes of the World Banks and European Unions and others can come in. So, that is what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to achieve a charity project. We're not really trying to be CSR interventions are very small. It's somebody says, I'm going to donate some computers to this school or something. We're trying to do something much bigger than that, and it needs to be done at scale. The economics of bandwidth, the more you buy, the cheaper it is. Actually, by opening up this sector, you drive the bandwidth demand. If you imagine 10,000 schools all using 10 megabits per second, that's 100 gig. Now that might be something that enables a purchaser of 100 gig in a market where there is no 100 gig customers. So, driving the demand, driving down, that's what I'm trying to get at. The feasibility study is giving us this 20.4% IRR of the thing, sustainable as a not-for-profit in its own right.
Hi there, Ed from South Africa. Part of what I've done over the last, I think the first one I've done was in probably 2007, but I've been involved with various school projects to get connectivity, and back in the day it was to get just a computer lab going, for example. There are two big problems that seem to need fixing before the connectivity could be fixed. One is just the education of the staff. So if you spoke of that, sorry, I have a tiny bladder, so I had to run out to the loo halfway through. But education of the staff is a big problem. And then secondly is like the equipment in the school itself, because I looked at the map. I'm from South Africa. I know a lot of those schools might have connectivity, but what they practically have is something that 1 or 2 people in the school can use, but not generally. It's not even in the library in most cases, because either the headmaster's decided it must be in his office and that's the only place where it'll be used, or, I mean, I take an example of a school in a rural area just outside of Durban where someone had spent money to install smart boards through every classroom in the school.
Yeah.
And gave it a 1 meg satellite connection, and this thing needs to speak to the cloud the whole time, and that's broken. So how are you going to bridge that gap as well? Because if you do the one, it's great, but without the other half, it's kind of going to be a problem.
Yeah. There's 5 things you need, right, to enable digitization of education. Number 1 is devices. That's the computers. Number 2 is, teachers that are digital savvy. You need electricity. You need power. If you don't have power, none of this works. And you need educational content, and not just, go find it on YouTube, but you need governments that are looking at digitizing their curriculum, digitizing their content, and then you need connectivity. So what you end up with is this 5-legged stool, and you can take it by 1 leg and it still stands up, and you take it. Eventually, nothing works if you don't have at least three things working out of this. There are other UN interventions taking place around digital transformation of education, and UNICEF have an education department as well. The GIGA initiative is purely focused on connectivity. I'm a connectivity guy. I don't sell laptops, but we're just trying to address this one pillar, right? I think it requires other initiatives to take place. When you look at the overall cost, if you would start a brown field and say there's no, a country has got none of this, you would spend most of the cost on devices. Connectivity piece is maybe actually 10 or 15% of the cost of this thing. Putting electricity to a school is very expensive, but we have solar, we have other solutions. So we are just focusing on, GIGA is focusing purely on connectivity. This one I'm talking about today is focusing purely on this first mile, but we're just breaking the problem down and solving it one by one, what is in our ability to do.
Cool, thank you.
Hello, my name is Abdullahi Nasurulado. I'm from Internet Society Parent Fellow, but I'm from Zamfara, I'm Nigerian. Right now, what was going on in my state, we're having a kind of e-governance. My government is trying to have digital literacy right from the kindergarten schools, and they have also partnered with Galaxy Backbone. They are trying to connect both of the MDAs, that is ministry, department, and other agencies.
Yeah.
So, but you see, the problem that we are facing now is the partnership is not the problem. The money is not the problem. I believe that my government is trying to produce any kind of amount so as to achieve its objectives in terms of connectivity. So one of the problems is how can we have a better connectivity in the sense that if we trying to use fiber cables in the connection, so even though you install it today, tomorrow before you come back, it will be stolen. So it's any kind of means necessary to mitigate against any future occurrence on this kind of problem.
Just say again, just.
Yes, even the cables used to be stolen. Maybe you were in the middle of the project, so the cables will be stolen by other citizens there. I don't know if there are kind of other means that you can follow to have that kind the cable to be installed without it being stolen by anybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's. I just think solving the problems is all about partnerships, right? It's all about different people are going to come together to solve the problems individually, right? You know, so my call to action is here. This is the problem we're trying to solve. This is the partnerships we want. But I think, you know, if you set this as an objective, if a country says we want to, you know, digitize education as an objective, or even just, you know, it's giving access to information, right? So I think the same people, I think everybody trying to solve the problem is in the same WhatsApp group, in summary, right? And that's how it's going to happen. I hope that sort of answers your question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Great presentation. So we have people who joined virtually, and they have a couple of questions for you. The first one is, it says, I'm going to read exactly what is here.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting presentation there. I would like to know how local ISPs can come in and help deliver the last mile connectivity for a case like this.
The last mile.
Last mile.
Yeah, so is that local ISPs, is it? It said local ISPs.
Local ISPs.
Yeah, okay. So the off-takers of the bandwidth of this project can be, you know, what matters is the end user, right? If the end user is a school, then it's ambivalent. You know, this project doesn't mind who connects a school. It can be a government, you know, run parastatal, or it could be an ISP. So if an ISP says, I'm going to connect 100 schools, and we say it's 10 megabits per second per school, that means that ISP can buy 1 gigabits per second of bandwidth at a cheaper rate for the purpose of connecting those schools. And then we'll monitor to check that they're using it for that purpose. So that is how, you know, it is there to enable ISPs, local ISPs, national ISPs, you know, even satellite LEO providers, satellite providers, you know, government agencies to do that. What matters is that the end user is a school, and there are children in that school that are getting connected.
Okay, great. The second one says, I missed the contact details of the presenter. Can you please share? Basically, how do they get in contact with you?
Okay, I will go back. I know they've taken it off. My email. Can you go back to the last slide, if anyone's watching there? My email address is ben.roberts@digitaleconomy.ke. I would tell you Naroa's email address, but she's got a very long surname that I find struggle to spell. Mine is easier, so it's ben.roberts@digitaleconomy.ke.
Okay, I would also add that all the presentations will be made available on the website, afpif.org, after the conference. So you can actually go there and download the conference that Ben just presented, and then you would have all the necessary information that you need. Yeah. Okay, the final one, I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I'm just going to read it. Okay. It says UNICEF/GIGA has a program called Connectivity Credit, which targets ISPs as connectivity partners to the schools online.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement.
It's a question, but it's a comment, but I'll answer it. So GIGA has a number of different programs. Connectivity Credits is another one. I know about it because I worked on it I partnered with Connectivity Credits in my former life before doing my own things. But Connectivity Credits is a way to perhaps drive the economics in the last mile. It's a marketplace to connect schools, to encourage partnerships, to encourage last mile providers, ISPs, fiber providers to come together, and it's using aggregating demand to connect schools and bringing together partnerships to make it affordable. all of the initiatives of GIGA have one sole aim, which is to connect schools to internet. And I think those initiatives are focused on solving the problems. So I'm looking at talking today about a first mile economics problem. Connectivity credits is more looking around some of the last mile economics, bringing together partnerships to make it viable in the last mile. It's all about making sustainability, right? We're seeing that projects that have happened where money's been put into connecting schools, when that money runs out, they die, right? We need to get it to a stage where the school needs the internet and can afford to pay for it. And that means that the usefulness of the internet has to go up. They have to become, this is a high priority, up there with teachers and books and electricity, and we need to make it so the price is something they can afford to keep up.
Okay. The last one, I guess this, the person also missed the slide on this. What are the timelines for the GBON and the GCash, and how can internet exchanges partner with you?
They can partner with us by, we're here for meetings for the whole of this duration, but the timelines really for getting operational, I'm here to, I like to do things quickly, so I'd like the thing to be, enabling schools by the end of 2025. I'm not here to go at a slow pace. So we're aiming to get up and running and sign partnerships right here, so we're ready and available.
Thank you.
Thank you.